My core value is kindness, compassion, kindness, taking care of people. I got into medicine because I want to help people. I love the human side of things. When I got to my interview for the Alex School of Medicine, one of the very first things we do is we watch the Mayo Values video. And it goes into, of course, the Mayo core values, rich ties, right? Compassion, kindness, stewardship, excellence, and of course, the standout above all is the needs of the patient come first. And that has always been the big thing for me. I've been terrified of going into medicine and being stuck in a situation where the needs of the corporate dollar come first. And I really wanted to go to a place that was truly about taking care of people. And as I'm watching the values video on that first day when I'm there at my interview, I just remember, I'm embarrassed to acknowledge it, I started crying watching the values video because I'm like, I actually believe it here.
We just have some time now. We don't really have an agenda. If we just want to sit together and kind of all acknowledge it, that's fine. If people have some stories or memories or thoughts or ways that Bran has been part of their medical school experience, we would love to hear about that. So the floor is open.
No matter where we're at, I think we're all thinking of Brandon and his family. Doctor and I were reminiscing about Brandon's interview day because he made such a good first impression on interview day and was always just such a character. We were just sort of reminiscing on like the big personality that Brandon had and how, I don't know if you guys remember that musical we went to like first year, I think it was called Ball or something. And like we drug Brandon along and they drug him up on stage and he just like did his thing acting with the professional actors and like he did his voices that he always does when we made him read all of the like the cases in class too.
He'll be pink and quite clean.
So that was like one of my favorite Brandon moments because we got to see him in his pre-med school life just doing what he loved.
Dr. would have us do skits for his disruptions in development course, and I'll just say we all benefited from his theater background, the characters he would do, the accents he would do. He was a great, somewhat demanding and ornery 70-year-old lady. He could nail that character, and it was just so fun to watch him in his element. Maybe someone who has been in his group for that can have a more specific story than that.
Yeah, no, that was a long time ago. I seem to recall that most of us were potatoes, and Brandon quite literally took the entire project on his shoulders and made it a masterpiece. Amazing.
Yeah, I remember that one. It was, I think, like the Fowler stages of faith. And then none of us had an idea of where to start. And then he offered to write the skit for us. We made it up like a fake religion where you said gloop at the end of every sentence. It was brilliant. He's so creative. Also, he tailored every part to our personalities. And like with that, I could really tell if he really saw each one of us and knew each one of us, he really took the time to get to know us. And I feel like that made being part of the skit so much fun. I usually hate public speaking and acting and all that, but it was just a lot of fun to participate.
In first year, I just kind of remember thinking back and being super intimidated by Brandon because whatever the topic was, he could literally like recite the textbook entry. And I just remember me who was procrastinating and like didn't have my life together. Seeing that, I was like, oh my God, is this the standard that we're all held to? And he was just so knowledgeable. And I was like, oh my God, he must be a super genius. And I think he is. But I also think that over the last few years getting to know him, I think there's so much more to it. And he works so incredibly hard and is just such a kind soul. And every time I needed something or needed to talk or had anything that could potentially need help with from anyone, I knew that it was always Brandon I could reach to. And he was always there and never asked for anything. And Rothal was such a true friend.
I was just looking back through my GroupMe conversations with Brandon, and every single one of them was him being so supportive, even when I didn't show that I was struggling or didn't even do anything that impressive, he would just, what's the word? Like gas you up. Like, you were doing so well, all these things. And then invite me to the study group for anatomy and give me compliments on research that I'd barely done. I was basically a potato. And yet he was like, you're doing so well. You must be so humble. I'm just a potato. And just absolutely such a kind person and so smart, and he's just so valuable. He's so valuable. And I know he was struggling with mental health before, and we kind of bonded over that because so was I. And I hope that whatever stage he's in, he finds that love for himself, because he deserves it. He's just such a wonderful person, and I am very grateful to have him bless my time here.
And I was looking at some of my text messages with him, and what I remembered from that is we were talking about the obstetrics and gynecology rotation, which neither of us loved, and we were just talking about the silly things that we didn't know how to do. Like, we didn't know what the unwritten rules were for who was supposed to wear a white coat. Are med students allowed to wear a white coat? Is that only a resident thing? And like, you can just be totally honest and vulnerable with him. Like, you don't have to worry at all about putting up a facade, because there is zero chance there's going to be any judgment or any looking down on you for admitting some of your own weaknesses or anxieties or uncertainties. And he's just a really good person to talk to about things like that.
One memory of Brandon that I think I'll never forget was our anatomy finals first year. And you all remember, those of you in the third year class, that we had two separate finals. One of them was like the written test, and one of them the lab practical. And they were on different days, like a Thursday and a Friday. And after the first one on the Thursday, Brandon, I think during the test, he had some abdominal pain that was a little bit worrying to him. So he wanted to go get checked out. And he was my roommate. So I was like, I'll go with you, if you want to go to the hospital to get it checked out. So we ended up waiting in the ED in St. Mary's. And while this time, he was like sitting there in pain, and we were talking through all the anatomy and going through all this crazy stuff that I didn't know very well. And I just remembered, how much kindness there was, that he was not worried about his own pain and his own feelings, but focusing on trying to use that time to help me. And to be honest, I don't think I would have passed if it weren't for that.
Everything is canceled. Everything is off because of COVID. Everything is canceled. So just stay at home.
I don't know if you guys remember this or if he ended up getting to the whole class too, but like early COVID, when he did like all those group me really personalized messages, he explained it to me as like he had like the hat he was pulling names from. And like every day he like had 2 or 3 of us where he just sent these really long, almost book chapter length messages about just like his favorite things about us and what he appreciated. And I like read back through mine. You can just tell from the first sentence that he types that meant a lot to him, and that we all meant a lot to him, as he clearly means a lot to all of us.
Me and Brandon, the first couple of years, we never super connected because he was always at the very front row of all of our classes, and I was always in the very back. But over the last couple months, he really wanted to be an anatomy TA, and I was one of the anatomy TAs. So we got to work a ton together after his OB-GYN rotation had ended. And then after that ended, he picked up a research project with me. So I've been able to get to know him just a little bit more these last couple months. And if there's one word that I feel like exemplifies what Brandon was, in many ways, he was a support and a savior. I remember we were drowning in anatomy. We were trying to teach the SFAs and the PAs and the MDs, and we had like 4 TAs, and I was pulling like 90-hour weeks, and I was like, this was supposed to be a break for third year, and it definitely wasn't. And Brandon reached out to me and he was like, dude, I want to be a TA, but I'm stuck in OB-GYN. I was like, please save us. And he figured it out. He got done and he came right on. And I remember introducing him. He had these long, luscious orange locks, and I hadn't seen him in months. And I was like, wow, look at your hair. It's awesome. And I remember telling Dr. Kodafana, I introduced Brandon, and in simple words, he's awesome and he is our savior in this. And he pushed us through. He was there in the evenings till 8 p.m., 9 p.m., helping the PA students getting through their finals. He wrote exams and he did everything he could to give every resource he could to every student he interacted with. It was a great support. And then with some research that I had kind of shored up on and I couldn't figure out where to go with it, he jumped on and in 24 hours accomplished more than I did in 3 months. So his work ethic was impeccable and he was a support, and I really feel like he became a brother.
I think joining your guys' class late, like you guys are, all of you are incredibly intelligent individuals and just amazing. But you just see Bran just like an extra level. And, you know, as clinicians and coming in, I think for me, a prototypical clinician, someone we should all strive for is this optimal intelligence, which he has, but then just unconditional care. And I think for all of us, like every single one of us knows that is Brandon. Just, you know, as much as he's intelligent, he offers so much more in care, and it's everyone. It's everyone. And I think for us, for Group F for last year, he was kind of the leader of our group, and his impressive in his intelligence and his care, but his work ethic. Like he would text all of us in the morning when after he'd give out the schedules for our Group F at our Reach Clinic, and he would want to make sure that we were there on time, and then still to make sure that every patient was covered in case an extra one showed up, he would also show up even though his patient was at 10:30. And it's just heartbreaking, and he's an amazing person. And
I was in Reach Clinic with Bran as well. And so I was just looking through my text messages and I found your neurosis can rest easy another day because I will be 1 with like 20 zeros after a % be on time. No early to my patient encounter this lovely Thursday morning. And Brendan responded, my neuroses are eternally grateful. And I think that just kind of goes to show how he's just on top of it. But on top of that, he's such a nice guy. I just remember like you kind of see that like caring and softness in his personality, how he's kind of very in touch with whenever he talks with anybody about what they're on, what they've been through. So, and more than being intelligent, he's just such a warm human.
Along that same vein, I was in Brandon's advanced doctoring as well, TMF. And I remember I was telling my boyfriend, I was like, oh man, look at my group. I have somebody who's already a dentist. I have somebody who already has a master's degree in immuno from Harvard. Man, and Brandon, he does physics, he acts, he does it all. And he was like, it's okay. I'm sure you'll bring something. But it was kind of one of those doubtful, encouraging things. But he ended up meeting my boyfriend, needed to be seen at the Reach Clinic, and he got seen by Brandon. And I remember he was like super worried that his arm was infected and everything. And he came out of the appointment just like smiling and happy and like not worried at all. And he was like, your classmate Brandon is really cool. Like you weren't lying. Like I'm sure you're the dim bulb. And it's like, he was like, yeah, I can tell he's really smart, but he's also just really nice. And I think that was just the impression that Brandon left upon people. Like you could talk to him for 20 minutes. It's like, yo, you realize he's brilliant, like hands down. But on top of that, he's funny and he's compassionate. He's just an all around nice guy.
I also enjoyed working with Brandon in the Reach Clinic group. And I have a funny story. So Brandon and I were going to see one of our patients, and it was the first patient of the day. I came up dressed up nice. Brandon he has this nice brown suit with these pinstripes on it. We were ready to go. We had our A games, go to see the first patient. Brandon tells me, oh, by the way, this is a Spanish-speaking patient. And I'm like, great, I speak Spanish. I took Val and Beatrice's Spanish selective. This is going to go fantastic. And so he gets the blood pressure cuff on. He gets the blood pressure correct. And so next we go into those rooms with those rickety chairs and that exam room. We sit down and we're like, okay, I try to speak my Spanish, and then I go to Brandon. And Brandon, he speaks Italian. And so he would always like have this very vocal Spanish. He's like trying to use the vocabulary. He's using his hands to speak. And then halfway through, the patient starts speaking completely fluent English to us. And I look at him and he looks at me. And we just finished that exam as quickly as possible. But at the end of the day, we got the patient's antihypertensive and sent them on the way.
So Timothy and I lived with Brandon for a year. And the one thing that every day I get reminded of him ever since I met him is washing clothes. because the guy was like so anxious about lint in the dryer. He constantly reminded me how one of the major risk factors for fires in the household is lint in the dryer. And every single time I put my clothes in the dryer, I'm reminded of that. And I become anxious about it myself. I can think of Brandon just like, get rid of the lint, and just like getting angry at me, like, what are you doing? He's like yelling at me and Timothy, which is good. I'm glad he did that, but I hope that you all do that now.
One of the things I remember the most about sharing a house with Brandon and then Yoni our first year was getting to share my love of music with Brandon. He was such a gifted musician and vocalist. Of course, he was an actor and performed in musical theater for many years. He was honestly a lot better than I am. And he taught me a lot over the years. He had a piano, which he was actually also very good at. And we would sit in front of it, for hours when we weren't busy studying and singing and playing and talking about music. And one of the songs I remember the most, we were getting ready for the convocation of thanks after anatomy. I guess that was like the beginning of second year, end of first year. And he decided he was going to sing this song called To Where You Are. It's made famous by Josh Groban. And I heard him sing that song so many times. He practiced it for months to the point where I knew it by heart by the time the convocation actually rolled around. But I still maintain that he did it better than Josh. Just about everything that I'd ever heard the both of them do. And whenever I hear Josh Groban now, I think in my mind, is that Josh or is that Brandon?
I wish upon tonight to see you smile, with only for a while to know you're there. A breath away is not far to where you are. Would you maybe be my wife?
I also have a funny / semi-embarrassing for me story. I remember Brand's fun fact a lot of the time in first year when we were all getting to know each other was that he's getting married soon, and he was so excited. And I remember him telling us about the theme of the wedding and how they're going to have lots of books there, and it was just so like beautiful and warm and whimsical, like Fran is. And I remember at family weekend when we were all getting our stethoscopes and stuff, we barely knew a lot of each other by that point, but what I knew about Bran was that like he was so excited for his wedding, and I was too. But I mean, I knew I was invited, but when I ran into Sarah and Bran at the subway, I don't know if Sarah remembers this, but the first thing I said, Bran was like, "This is my fiance, this is Jenny, a medical student." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for your wedding. Like, it's going to be so beautiful. Like, I can't wait." And then I just remember they looked at each other and I was like, okay, that was awkward. It's okay. Like, they probably don't think anything of it. And then when we walked away, my family was like, "Oh, you made like friends so fast. Like, you're going to their wedding." And I was like, wait, that's not what I meant at all. I was just really excited. And yeah, but I remember telling Bram this way into second year, and he was like, "Not a problem. Like, of course you could have come to our wedding." Like, he was so nice about it. And I was really happy that I did see pictures of the wedding and it was beautiful.
Brandon, I remember walking back from class, I don't know how many 100 times we would just walk and talk, like plans for the future, how's life going? I can't put it all into words. There's too many memories, but the dude was, inspiring me almost every day. He was like a motivational force for all of us. He still is, because I don't know how many people who I've randomly met and I talk to them about what's med school like. They ask me, and I talk about these people I've met who are very unique, and Brandon's one of them. He's a genius. I don't know what that word means. He just cares about everybody so much. He taught so many things to us. He's a beautiful person, like personality, so many skills. Everyone around him is uplifted by him.
Another thing I loved was how he appreciates the tiny things in life. Besides just knowing the things about you that you didn't even know to recognize about yourself, and telling you that during one of a time period we've never been through like this before, he would get excited about the little things in life and remember those. I remember our neurology professor, oh yes, example, like you can't remember exactly what happened on this day. Picked out Brandon. I was like, what were you doing on this day at this time? And he said, I was sitting on this couch with this person watching this show. Because he had categorized everything in his life at that point and literally knew what he was doing several years ago at this time on this day. Just notice these things. And I remember one time, small group, his wife and him were there, and I think it was a video game store of some sort, and we discovered that there were a bunch of arcade games in the back, and he just got so excited, like jaw drop, lit up, just, it was the tiny things.
I'm a fourth year, not in your guys' class, but I appreciate being able to be here today because I am Brandon's med sib in the fourth year class. And I remember being paired with Brandon and being so excited that I was getting paired with someone who had such an extensive background in performance and singing, because that's what I did before coming here. And we all know what it is like to just have that imposter syndrome or feel like you're the only one with this certain characteristic or certain background or whatever. And I feel like we think about mentorship as like this one-way street of, oh, I have the experience, I'm going to share it with you. But I can't say enough how meaningful it was to me to just see another student with a similar background. And it's just really affirming for me. And I don't know if at the time Brandon was aware of it, but he gave me a lot of like reassurance, like, okay, and that's some anomaly in the system. We're bringing unique perspectives in here and contributing in a really positive way. And I just feel really fortunate to be paired with him. Like you all have said this whole evening, he is just this, incredible source of positivity and kindness. And I appreciate every chance I get to interact with him. I was always like racking my brain for like, what can I possibly teach this person? He's got it all together. And, and he's older than me. Who put me I was like, this feels like I'm the one who's doing a lot of the learning and growing here. So I really appreciate that relationship, and I appreciate Brandon a lot.
I'm Brandon's med sib in the second year. The first few months I was here, I met him early on, and then I just saw him everywhere. It seems like I saw him at least once a day, whether he was out running a meeting, a lunch meeting, or on Mitchell. Like he just seemed everywhere at once, and I was just so floored by just every time I saw him, he always made sure to stop, check in with me. Even if, I'd seen him that morning, he just always made time to make sure that I was doing okay and that I was making it the transition to med school well. Since then, every time I've ever asked him for something, I'll ask him for just some quick advice, and then he just dump a paragraph or an essay on me, always going above and beyond to give. And it's been tough hearing about this. So
one story that really sticks out to me that reminds me of Brandon and kind of his undying, his giving support to everyone. I was talking to him about how crappy the backpacks were that we got for orientation, and like the zipper had fallen off, there was like a hole coming out, and he had a backpack that he loved that he recommended, and he started out telling me about his backpack and how amazing it was, and he was like, you know what, I'll just give it to you. And I was like, no, I can't take your backpack. And he was like, no, I don't need it. I have other backpacks. I was like, no, but just tell me which one you got so I can order one myself. But he's just so sweet. And I can remember so many moments like that with Brandon, where he was just willing to give everything.
I remember meeting him the very first week of medical school, and he said that he was from Wisconsin, and my whole family's from Wisconsin. So I was so pumped. I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to talk about the Packers. This is going to be great. So I bring up the Packers, and he's like, oh, I don't really follow sports that closely. And I remember just being like, oh, well, that's just such a downer. But I learned that he had so many other qualities that I so admired. I'm kind of a know-it-all, and I like to know all the facts about everything. And I remember being so frustrated because he could recite paragraphs from different PowerPoints we'd seen, or we would all watch the sketchy videos to learn. And he would say, I don't use those because I remember the ones I come up with in my head on my own. And I was just blown away that somebody could come up with that much imagery and remember things in such detail that I was struggling to know. But you can't even be mad at him because he was so humble and so kind. And you knew that he was doing it because he cared not only about what he was doing, but also about his patients and everyone around him. And I really learned to admire him, and my heart goes out to him and his whole family.
I'm going to walk through each course very quickly and see if I can.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how many of you had the chance to learn about this elaborate memory device mnemonic he used to learn all about anatomy and about the human body, but for basically like every single muscle and bone and joint and like anything there was to know about the human body, he was coming with all these visual mnemonics, and they were just these funny and bizarre images. Like for the supinator muscle, like he would have this image of a can of soup and like someone like shooting a laser at it and terminating it because it was a soup terminator, which was a supinator. And I don't know how many hundreds of these he had stored in his head, and he tried to teach me and it did not go well. So probably a problem with the pupil and not the teacher there, but it was amazing just the knowledge he has in his head and his dedication to that. It's just quite something.
One time I ran into him in the gym and he told me that he had encoded all of cardiology in objects in the DAN. And he said that he had calculated how many there were, and it was like almost 2,000. It was incredible.
He tried to explain the method to me one day because I was lamenting how I can't possibly remember everything, Brandon. Like, please send me help. And ultimately, I could not contemplate or understand it. So halfway through him trying to explain this incredibly elaborate thing, I was like, so you have a mind palace and you're Sherlock Holmes. And I think that was maybe the best thing I ever said to Brandon, because like from that moment on, our discussions were always Sherlock Holmes, Indiana Jones, and Disney. And that was, and like, I guess it's called the Cicero?
Cicero, yeah.
Mind palaces.
Brandon has the most extensive vocabulary of anyone I've ever met. He was, I think, the first friend I made in medical school, and we would go and have lunch together at least a few times a month in the first 2 years. And it was one of the most interesting friendships I've ever had, because we disagree about everything, absolutely everything, from the protocol for crossing the street to how you should study, everything. But he's just such a thoughtful and reasonable person that our conversations were always cathartic and informative and wonderful. And I can definitely agree with everyone that his ability to retain information would put a silicon hard drive to shame. Oftentimes at the end of a lecture, I would go to him and ask about the most esoteric thing that the professor had asked, and he would just know it. Or whenever I asked a question in class and the professor thought he answered it, Brandon knew he didn't, and at the end of the class, he would seek me out and give me the answer. And that's how it was most of the time. So then there was this one time where we were practicing neurology exams near each other, and he asked me how I was doing it, and I felt like I had received a Congressional Medal of Honor. Like, Brandon was asking me a thing. It was like the one time in my life that's ever gonna happen. That was the coolest thing ever. He's an amazing person, an amazing friend.
I think the thing that sticks out to me most about Brandon is his ability to see a room and see people and see the person, and to understand the implications of maybe even small comments and the impact that that could have on another person. And I won't go into detail, but there were several times when a statement was made and, you know, it bothered me, but I don't really ever show it. I just think about it later, and it goes on and on. And Brandon he'd always come up to me, and I could see that he understood how I felt or how I may have been feeling. And his action by just saying something really nice to kind of combat that would be what I would think about instead of whatever it was. And so for me, I just think he was so considerate and always truly wondering how people were doing. You know, we always say, hey, how you doing? And we walk past each other. But Brandon, when he'd ask it, you would feel like he really wanted to know how you were doing, and that he had all the time in the world to sit there and listen to whatever was going on with you. And I think out of all of the things, that I really think there should be more people like him in the world, always worried about everyone else.
One of my first memories of Brandon was being in a basic doctoring group with him. And we were leaving the sim center, and all of our patients that day had been in scenarios around a circus. So they all had circus names and had gotten injured in circus accidents and things like that. And they were just really ridiculous and fun to think about. And we were walking out of the sim center, and the policy was that those were real patients, and we were supposed to be practicing patient confidentiality and not talk about the patients after we left. And I was still talking about my patient and how silly it was and things like that. And he reminded me, he was like, oh, don't forget about keeping that confidential. That was your patient. And he really made an impression on me as the kind of person who has regard for truly everybody, even in this case, a fake person, a fake patient. But even through Reach Clinic and the other kind of clinical experiences we had together, really, he truly exemplified, just as other people have said, really seeing the person and being present with them and really conveying the utmost respect for who they were at all times during the scenario and after. So I really appreciated that about Brandon.
I don't think any of our med school experiences would be quite the same without Brandon. He's by far one of my favorite people in the class.
All I can say probably sums up what everyone else is saying. He was probably one of the most exceptional people I knew. He was incredibly talented, but he was also very kind. And I'd say probably one of the most humble people I know. I mean, I remember a lot of times walking back with him from clinic, he'd always emphasize everybody else's effort or everybody else's success and always belittle how much he contributed to the team and how much he always helped. He was always somebody that lifted those around him. So I think he embodied everything med students and physicians aspire to be.
He goes charging up the cliffs of life, a reckless mountaineer. I could help him not to stumble, I could warn him not to fear. I could shout until I'm breathless, and he'd still refuse to hear. Oh. But you cannot close the acorn once the oak begins to grow. And you cannot close your heart to what it fears and needs to know. That the hardest part of love is the letting go. As a child I found a sparrow that had fallen from its nest. And I nursed him back to health till it was stronger than the rest. But when I tried to hold it then, it pecked and scratched my chest till I lay.
Alright, give me a key and I'll go.
And I watched it fly away from me with its bright and selfish song. And a part of me was cursing I had held it grow so strong. And I feared it might go hungry, and I feared it might go wrong, oh. But I could not close the acorn once the oak began to grow. And I cannot close my heart to what it fears and needs to know. That the hardest part of love is letting go. And it's only in need and grows a rose without a thorn. And your children start to leave you on the day that they are born. They will leave you there to cheer for them. They will leave you there to mourn ever so. Like an ark on uncharted seas, their lives will be tossed. And the deeper is your love for them, the crueler is the cost. And just when they start to find themselves is when you'll fear they're lost. Oh, but you cannot close the acorn once the oak begins to grow. And you cannot close your heart to what it fears and needs to know. That the hardest part of love and the rarest part of love and the truest part of love just letting go.
Merry Christmas!
We don't need to keep any of this.